Hello everyone, my name is Chef Nicholas Pobieglo, and I am going to be your host for the evening. Welcome to my show. The first thing we're going to do is going to be the most important thing about the show, and that's going to be our safety and our sanitation. So the first thing we're going to do is wash our hands. We're just going to get the hot water running, get some soap. You sing your ABCs twice, and you're good to go. Behind me, what we have is a standard setup, which is going to be my cutting board. Underneath my cutting board, I have 2 wet paper towels down to make sure that the cutting board doesn't move around while I'm cutting. And then I have my chef knife, and I have a smaller knife to work with. So from here, what we're going to do, we have an appetizer, we have a soup, and we have a sandwich. And so the appetizer we're going to be working with is a Swiss cheese and Parmesan cheese fondue. To accompany the cheese fondue, we've got a rosemary Parmesan Asiago bread. We're going to chop it up, and we're going to toast it to make croutons. We also have apples and a pear. So we're going to take those and we're going to cut those up, and those pair very well with our cheese fondue. The next recipe we'd be making is we're going to be making a spicy and creamy roasted tomato soup. The next thing we'll be making is a croque monsieur, which is just a fancy French word for a ham and cheese sandwich. What it is we take our ham and our cheese and we put it inside the sandwich, or if one of your family members doesn't like ham, you can do this with turkey also. And then what we'll do is we'll make a cheese sauce or a bechamel, and we'll pour it over the sandwiches, and we will toast them. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to start our oven. We're going to actually start our oven on broil, because we need to fire roast our tomatoes. And we're going to make sure that our oven is about at the middle rack, because you don't want the tomatoes too close to the broiler. And so next what we're going to do is we're going to take care of our tomatoes here. We're going to peel off the sticker, and with all of our produce, you're going to want to wash it because it's required. And then we're going to take the tops off and put the open side face down on a sheet pan lined with parchment paper. And so we want to make sure we discard all of the stickers. The stickers are not edible, and so if they end up on the plate, that is a contaminant. Our sheet pan, and we're going to aluminum foil our sheet pan. It just keeps the pan from getting dirty, so it helps make cleaning easier. And then we're going to go ahead and olive oil the sheet pan too. Rub that in. I have this knife because I have my chef's knife, but we don't cut tomatoes with the chef's knife. We want to cut a tomato with a serrated knife. This knife does have 1/3 of the blade is serrated, so we're going to use the 1/3 of the blade, and we're going to cut through our tomatoes in a sawing motion, and it reduces how much we squish the tomatoes and the juices go everywhere, because we do want the juices for this soup. Shouldn't take more than about 3 to 4 minutes in the broiler. We don't want to torch them, we just want to toast them, and then we'll set them aside and we will peel them once they come out of the broiler. And so this is all discard. And so we're going to take our tomatoes. We're going to take our tomatoes over to our oiled and foiled baking sheet. We're going to go ahead and toss this right into the oven. Just for a minute. And so while that's happening, we're going to go ahead and take care of these tomatoes and get these tomatoes out here. We did the tomatoes first because the tomatoes are going to be our longest item. That's going to take the longest, and the soup as well is going to take the longest. And so next, I'd like to point out the fact that our tomato soup is courtesy of Iron Chef Michael Simon. It is one of his recipes that we are using. And so next we need to get a soup pan, something to put our soup in. It's going to be a big soup. So, whatever big 4-quart pan you have works. Or if you happen to have a Dutch oven like I do, a Dutch oven works fantastically. We're going to go ahead and put some oil down inside the Dutch oven. We're not going to start that yet because we don't need to. The next thing that we need to do is we need to chop this onion. I have a 1 whole white onion. We are not going to need the whole white onion. I've cut one end of the onion off, and then I'm going to cut the onion in half. This makes it easy to mince my onion. I'm going to remove the skin. The skin is not edible, and I'm going to remove any excess skin it takes to make the onion look appetizing. And so this onion looks just fine to me. If you could see, there's a spot on this onion where it's not the greatest. It's because it's a fresh local onion and it's organic, but we probably won't need up to that point in the onion. And so to cut our onion, what we're gonna do is we're gonna pull the board as close to the edge of the counter as we can. And next we're gonna take our knife and we're gonna pinch our knife and hold it just like we would cut something, or we're gonna hold it sideways. We're gonna bring the onion to the edge of the board. We're gonna palm down and we're gonna make parallel cuts in the onion most of the way through. This is generally how you're gonna mince an onion. And so we're gonna get as many cuts as we can in there, as many even cuts as we can. And once we've got that done, we're gonna go from the top down next. And so we're gonna make many, many thin, small lines through the top of the onion. And so we're gonna go as close to each other as possible. And you're gonna have to pinch the onion here. And close to the root as possible. And like I said, with this onion, we're not going all the way through because of that bad spot in our onion. And so we're just going up to that point. And all of these parts of the onion that are flying off, they're not staying inside of the onion. When you go to cut them, you can cut them separately, but they won't be uniform. So now we have our two halves of our onion right now. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna check our tomatoes really quick. They're looking all right. They definitely need longer. So the next thing we're going to do is take our knife and we're going to go top down. Point always hits the board first, and then you follow through. And so we're going to go ahead and chop this onion down. This is going to be about a medium dice. We're going to go over it a couple of times, hoping to get a small dice out of it, because that's ideally what we want, is a small dice out of our onion. If you find yourself crying while cutting an onion, there's a lot of tricks that you can use to help you with that. One of which I've heard is if you chew gum, it helps you out. There's also the theory that if you cut an onion next to an open flame, it helps you prevent from crying. But really what it just means is you need to sharpen your knife. Because instead of cutting through the cells inside the onion that make you cry, you actually squish them and it releases a chemical. And so I do have some tears forming, which means I do need to get my knives sharpened. And so now we've got our onion here that we're going to end up going over quite a bit just to make sure that we get it down to a smaller dice. I'm going to take our onion scraps and throw them away. Onion is not good in your compost. Any other vegetable is good in your compost. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to go over this. We are going to make a pile out of our onions and we're just going to rock the knife back and forth over our onions, using my palm as leverage to help me out. We're just going to go over it a couple of times just to cut down some of the bigger pieces. If you see some really big pieces that didn't make the cut, go ahead and just pull those out and you can toss those or set them aside or take care of them individually. So now we're going over this and it's looking pretty good. We're going to prep all of our ingredients for our recipes first. And what that's called is another fancy French word, mise en place. Mise en place means to have all of your ingredients ready and together before you start cooking. It also helps in case you're going and you're making something and you start cooking but you don't mise en place. Halfway through you realize, oh no, I'm missing an ingredient. Then you're going to have to run to the store. But are you going to run to the store with something on the stove? No. So it's going to create a dilemma. Grab oregano. We have our oregano ready. So that is mise en place. Next we have salt and pepper. Salt and pepper is already ready in these fancy containers that we can just grab pinches or teaspoons out of. Salt is mise en place. Normally, we would cut garlic. I already have garlic pre-chopped, so garlic is mise en place. We need 3/4 of a cup of chicken stock, but that we are tripling the recipe to make a nice big batch of soup. It should feed about 6 people, and so we have 2 1/4 cups of chicken stock. It is homemade chicken stock that I have personally made. Next, we have heavy cream. We're going to need some heavy cream. We have some right here. And sriracha. That is one thing that I didn't get. I neglected to get the sriracha. And so we have sriracha right here. And then we're going to need some blue cheese, and we have blue cheese over here. Blue cheese is ready to go. And some plain Greek yogurt. The plain Greek yogurt and the blue cheese are going to come together and they're going to make the cream part of the soup. From here, we should probably check our tomatoes. Tomatoes are starting to blister, and that's looking good, but they need to darken up a bit. And so we're going to let them do that. We need to make our cheese fondue because it's an appetizer, so it will be coming out first to all of your guests. So what we're gonna need to do is we've already chopped some onion and we needed some onion. We're gonna need to get some dry white wine. We're gonna put those together and we're gonna let those simmer for a little bit. While they're simmering for a little bit, we are gonna grate our Gruyere cheese, and that is the cheese that is gonna be going into our cheese fondue along with a little bit of Parmesan. Also, we're gonna need 1 tablespoon of cornstarch. I have cornstarch right here, some salt, some pepper, and some Dijon mustard. We also pulled the tomatoes out of the oven. The oven was on broil. Tomatoes look fantastic. I'm pretty sure our oil's looking, you can tell as you can either hold your hand far above the pan to see if it's hot, but also you can just run it around the pan. The hotter oil gets, the more liquid it becomes. So we're gonna add about half of our onions here. You're not supposed to hear a sizzle. That's okay. We're not looking to saute the onions. We're looking to sweat them. And so now we're gonna add about 2 teaspoons of garlic. I got a ½ teaspoon here. And we're also gonna add a pinch of salt here just to help this process along. So we've got our handy dandy plastic spoon that we're gonna use. And what we're gonna do next is we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna grab our tomatoes. We're gonna take a tomato and we're gonna put it on our board. And you can see the tomato is blistered. So we're just gonna peel away as much of that skin as we can. I'm not a fan of tomato skin. I don't know many people who are. And so we're going to peel away as much tomato skin as we can. And I'd say that's about good. And then from there, you could seed the tomatoes if you wanted to, but it's not necessary because we're going to go and we're going to blend it, and then we're going to put it through a sifter. So just cut it down. I'd say do about 1/8. 1/8 work fine. Maybe 1/16. Yeah, we'll go with 1/16. I'll just cut our slices in half. That's just gonna help them cook down. And so we're gonna do that with all of our tomatoes. We're gonna throw away the skin because the skin's, you don't want the skin, it's not tasty. It can't go in compost. It's not good for much. So we're gonna throw that away. And when we come back, we're gonna go ahead and check our onions and our garlic. We don't want them burning, we just want them sweating for a couple of minutes, and that's what they're doing right now. And they're doing a pretty good job. And so what we're doing when we're sweating the onions is we're increasing the flavor, but we're increasing the potency of the flavor of the onion. So it's not very pungent and it doesn't hit you when you bite it. And so now we're just gonna take our next tomato and we're just gonna see about de-skinning this guy. And if you can't de-skin them, that's okay. I would have personally preferred to roast my tomatoes over the grill. You would just do it the same manner, but the broiler works just fine. And the tomatoes are kind of hot, so working quickly helps. And also, we have to work quickly and efficiently to make sure that we get our meal out to our guests in time. Once we finish cutting this tomato, we're going to check on our onions and our garlic, because we need to be stirring those guys. We're going to go ahead and turn our heat down. And our onions and our garlic are sweating. And then what we're going to do, take them off the heat temporarily, just for a moment, while we finish cutting up our tomatoes. Because we need to have our tomatoes done. But what we can do is we can add our 2 1/4 cups of stock, because that's going to have to go in there. And so we took it off the heat, we added 2 1/4 cups of stock. And we're also going to add about 1.5 teaspoons of oregano. I'm going to go ahead and eyeball it in here. Don't try this at home. That's about 1.5 teaspoons of oregano. We'll go back and we'll taste the soup at the very end to make sure our flavors are on point and none of the flavors are masking each other. Now we're going to go back to the tomatoes. As soon as I picked up this tomato, all the skin came off of it almost for me. So that's a bonus. You're going to need about 3 pounds of tomatoes. You can use canned tomatoes. I just don't prefer to use the canned tomatoes. It would be about 48 ounces is what you're looking for if you're going to make soup for 6 people. Or just 5 large, ripe tomatoes. After we finish cutting up these tomatoes, we're going to add them to our Dutch oven. And everything is going to cook and become all nice and friendly. And all of our flavors are going to meld. And that gives us 10 to 15 minutes. And what we should do next is our cheese fondue, because that's our appetizer. And that's going to be going out to our guests first. And also what I was saying about that foil earlier is, as you're going to see here momentarily, the foil is going to help the pan to keep it clean. And so the pan's going to be really clean. And so now what we're going to do is we're just going to take the entire cutting board over to our pot, and we're going to add it. Juices and all. Try not to get the juices all over the place. And so that's going to be the beginnings of our tomato soup. We're going to put that back on the heat for about 20 to 25 minutes on medium-low. And so that's going to go ahead and cook off. I've already prepared some of the stuff while you guys were away. One of the things I did is I measured out a tablespoon of cornstarch and went and put that in our bowl. We're going to combine that with 1 pound of grated Gruyere cheese, and that's going to go inside of our cheese fondue. That's going to be the cheese. This can go in there, that's fine. We just want to get a rough grate on it because the cheese is going to melt. So we just want to grate all of this cheese. It's an entire pound of Gruyere cheese. We're also going to add about half a cup of Parmesan cheese to this also. Don't go ahead and grate your knuckles off. Once you get down to the stub of the cheese, that's fine. You can throw it in with the cornstarch too. And then over on the stove, we have our soup. Our soup is working on simmering. And we have 1 cup of dry white wine and about 3 to 4 tablespoons, so about a quarter cup of our onions went into there as well. And those are going to simmer for about 3 to 5 minutes once you get it up to a simmer. And that's going to work towards the cheese fondue also. And so we're down to the little pieces here. So we're going to take all of our grated Gruyere and we're going to toss it into our bowl with our cornstarch. And then we're just going to move on to the next piece of cheese. We have a pound of cheese to shred here, and then we'll measure out our Parmesan. Also, meanwhile, while our soup is cooking, and while our cheese, after we grate our cheese, our white wine and our onions are on the oven right now and they're simmering. Once they're done simmering, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to add our cheese to it, and we're going to slowly melt that and stir that while that's happening. While that's happening, what we can do is we can go ahead and cut our apple and our pear, chop those up into about a medium, maybe a large dice, looking for dipping into our cheese fondue. And then we can also go with chopping up this Asiago Parmesan bread, because we're going to toast that off in a skillet with some butter, and we're going to go ahead and use that for dipping into the cheese fondue also. Your hands are the best tools you have, so use them as long as they're clean. We're going to toss the cheese in the cornstarch. And so we're done here. Make sure, don't forget to get inside of your box grater. We're going to get all this cheese, and we're going to go in and mix it. The cornstarch inside of here is going to help act as a thickening agent, and it's going to help the cheese when we melt it. It's going to make it a nice thick fondue. And so I've mixed all of that up. That's looking just fine to me. And so we're going to set this aside now. We're going to go check what's going on with our white wine and our soup. Our soup was simmering, and so it's looking good there. And our white wine, I can smell our white wine simmering. We want to let that simmer for about 2 to 3 minutes, just so we can get it down to about half of what it was. And so the soup, I'm going to turn the soup up a little bit. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into apple and our pears. We're going to wash these really quick. Apples have a waxy film on them, and that's no good to eat. So we're just going to warm water, not hot, not cold, and we're just going to give it a quick rinse and then dry them. So you can use whatever apple, whatever pear you want. Right now I'm just using a yellow pear. I'm using a Honeycrisp apple for the texture. Take our trusty chef's knife, and we're going to break down this apple. Get rid of the core. Core is not edible. We're going to do the same thing with the pear. We're going to break down the pear. Make sure you get ripe pears and ripe apples to work with. Now we have all of our fruits chopped up. And we're going to break those down even further into about a large dice. We're going to go ahead and, you can compost the scraps that you have. We're going to go check our soup though. Our soup's looking pretty good. And our white wine and our onions look like they've reduced. Once the white wine has reduced with the onions, we're going to add the Gruyere cheese and the tablespoon of cornstarch, which we mixed together, and we're going to melt it. So it's going to go inside of our pan. And we're going to make sure that gets melted. That's going to become our cheese fondue. And at the very end, we're going to add salt and pepper to taste and some Dijon mustard. Stir that all around. It's already looking thick and creamy and delicious. And I can smell the soup now. The soup looks good. We're going to go ahead and take the soup off of the heat. And we're going to go ahead and blend that here in a minute. But you don't want to blend a hot degree. If the blender blows up, it's going to make a really big mess. Our cheese fondue I just turned down because it looked like it was cooking at a little bit too high of a temperature. And so we're working on melting our cheese fondue right now. And we're going to blend our soup. Welcome back again, guys. We did quite a bit of stuff during the break. We chopped up our pears into our large diced cubes. We went and put our bread into the oven to make croutons for the cheese fondue. We pulled the cheese fondue off the heat, and we pulled the tomatoes into our blender. So the next thing we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to salt and pepper our cheese fondue. Salt and pepper just a little bit, because we can always go back and add more. I'm going to add about a teaspoon of Dijon mustard. And we're going to blend that in. So now mix this in. The fondue is a little chunky because of the onion, but that's okay. You guys can go in and fix that. You can either take the onion out if you don't like it, or you can do whatever you want with it. So our bread is toasting in the oven right now. It's getting pretty close to done, and we've added all of our seasonings to our cheese fondue. Our cheese fondue does look pretty fantastic. It looks like a cheese fondue, and you're going to want to serve your cheese fondue warm, so it stays fondue-y. And so right now we're going to take ourselves back to our blender with our tomato soup in it. We're going to go ahead and blend our tomato soup. Be very careful, guys. And we're going to get a sifter inside of that pot so we can sift the soup and sift out everything that we don't want in the soup. Take it down. That looks pretty good to me. And so now we're going to take this and we're going to go ahead and we're going to sift it, but we'll do that in 1 second. What we're going to do now is we've chopped our pears, so next we're just going to chop our apples and do about a large dice, because that's going to need to go also with the cheese fondue, and then we'll be able to serve our cheese fondue. And so you're just going large dice on this. About 3/4 of an inch by 3/4 of an inch, and you'll be golden. You're also going to want to serve your cheese fondue with either forks, really long forks, or you're going to want to serve your cheese fondue with skewers, so people can skewer their items and dunk them in the cheese fondue. And so we're getting this done. As soon as we get this apple done, we'll go ahead and we'll put it in a bowl. And we'll go ahead and we'll serve up the cheese fondue a little bit prettier than what we have it now. Right now, we don't have a very pretty looking cheese fondue. And so what we'll go ahead and do is we'll put all of our apple chunks in our bowl. So we're going to go ahead and we are going to grab something to put our cheese fondue in. A nice pitcher works. And we're going to grab something to put our bread on. And so how we serve this is we could just go ahead and throw some apples onto our plate. Throw some pears onto the other end of the plate. And our toast should be done by now. And we can add some of our croutons here to the middle of the plate. And then we'll go ahead and put our cheese fondue in our pitcher, and then our patrons can taste. Now that we've prepared the cheese fondue to settle our tastes in the stomachs, for the time being, the next thing that we can work on is our tomato soup and our croque monsieur, our fancy French sandwiches. So what we've got going on is we've got our tomato soup sitting over on the stovetop, and it's simmering. It's going to simmer for about 10 to 25 minutes. We added the cream, the sriracha, and the oregano to it, and so we're going to let that be. Next, we have some blue cheese. We're going to add our blue cheese. First, we're just going to smush it down a little bit, make it a little more user-friendly to use. Here. And then we're going to combine that with some Greek yogurt, and that's going to create a cream sauce to go on top of our soup to counteract the spiciness of the soup. And so this is going to go right into our 4-cup measuring cup, because we'll just use that as a bowl. Repurposing things, that's what we're all about in the kitchen. We're going to go ahead and add some plain Greek yogurt. The plain Greek yogurt we're going to add about half a cup to, And then we are gonna mix it and see where we need to go from there. A half cup of plain Greek yogurt. We're just gonna mix this together. Mix it together as best as you possibly can, because we're trying to create kind of a cream, but it's gonna be thick. So we're just gonna mix this together. And so this is gonna be a cream. It's gonna soothe the palate, and it's gonna counteract the spiciness inside the tomato soup. I think we need to add a little bit more Greek yogurt, maybe about a 1/4 cup of Greek yogurt, just to give it a little more liquidy feel. And so then next, we'll go ahead and start on our croque monsieurs. Start off with on our croque monsieurs, we're gonna have to develop a roux. What is a roux? A roux is butter and flour. And it's butter and flour cooked together, and then you add milk. It thickens the bechamel sauce that we're gonna be making to go on top of the sandwiches. And so the croque monsieur we're gonna be making is brought to you by Ina Garden from the Food Network. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna take about 2 tablespoons of butter. We're gonna put 2 tablespoons of butter into our pan to melt. This is gonna melt down. Once it's melted down completely, we're gonna add 3 tablespoons of flour, and we're gonna whisk that to create a roux. And so we've got one whisk over here, and that's operating our tomato soup. It's going to go for 20 to 25 minutes, and it's gonna thicken it up. And so once it's thickened up, we're gonna taste it for flavor. And then once we've checked that, that'll be ready to go. And so now our butter's almost there. So we're almost ready to add our flour. And our tomato soup is looking good. Our patrons quite enjoyed our cheese fondue. Right now we've got our butter pretty much melted. So we're gonna add 3 tablespoons of flour. That'd be 1, that'd be 2, and here's our third. Here's our 3rd tablespoon of flour. Go ahead and whisk these. And so what it does is it creates a paste. And so the paste we are gonna cook just slightly until darkened. And so once we've got that, with our paste is good to go, that is 1/2 of the roux. The other half of the roux is our 2 cups of milk. I've got 1 cup of milk right here. So I'm going to add 1 cup of milk. And then we're gonna get another cup of milk in 1 second. We're gonna incorporate, it's easiest to incorporate the roux into half of the milk instead of all of the milk. And we're gonna whisk it until thickened. And we're gonna break up our paste that we made with the butter and the flour. And I got our tomato soup cooking right to my left here. Looking pretty good. It could use to go up a little bit. We want the tomato soup to be simmering, which just means tiny bubbles. So the paste is 1/2 of the thickener inside of our bechamel sauce. The other half of the thickener inside the bechamel sauce would be the Gruyere cheese. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take about 1/2 pound of Gruyere cheese, and we are going to melt that Gruyere cheese inside of our pot with some Parmesan cheese. And so that's where our Parmesan is going to come in. We're going to go ahead and add another cup of milk to that. And we've got 1/2 pound of Gruyere cheese. The other 1/2 pound of Gruyere cheese, this recipe takes 1 full pound of Gruyere cheese. That other pound is going to go on top of the sandwich as garnish and as well as inside the sandwich. And like I said before, you guys can make ham or turkey sandwiches. They're both delicious. And add the other 1 cup. And our sauce is looking nice and thick so far. And our soup has come to a simmer. And so we're going to turn down the bechamel, remove from the heat, and we're going to add our Gruyere, which I'm cutting up right now. We're going to add Parmesan cheese. We're going to add about 1/2 cup of Parmesan cheese. And we're also going to add some salt, some pepper, some garlic, some parsley, and some nutmeg. We really want this bechamel to be very flavorful. You can't really get a lot of flavor out of store-bought ham, and that's what we're going to be using. And I expect you to do the same thing. I don't expect you to go roast your own ham just to make a ham sandwich. It'd be nice, but not too many of us have time for that. I'm just going to give this a rough chop. You can grate it too. Either way works. We're going to bring our sauce on over here, right in front of us. We're going to add the Gruyere cheese off the heat. And now that we've added the Gruyere cheese, we're going to go ahead and add about half a cup of Parmesan cheese. You can use freshly grated, you can use whatever you've got. That's about a half a cup of Parmesan cheese. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to add some salt, pepper, and some garlic salt, and parsley. Easy way to measure is to shake it into your hand, because then if you have too much, you can always put it back, and you can estimate about what a teaspoon looks like inside your palm. And that's about a teaspoon and a half. Finally, we're going to add some nutmeg to this. It's kind of an unusual ingredient. You wouldn't expect it to go in this, but it does. So we are going to grab our ground nutmeg, do the same thing, put a little bit into our hand. We're looking for about a teaspoon, maybe half a teaspoon to go in there. We can always adjust our flavors later after we taste it. We're going to let this sit, and because we've got hot milk here, it's going to melt the cheese for us. If we need to, we'll go ahead and put it back on the heat for assistance. But meanwhile, we're going to run on 350 degrees, and we can get our baking sheet ready. Our baking sheet, we're going to line with aluminum foil, and then we are going to oil it. We're going to be toasting off our pieces of bread for our croque monsieur. I personally recommend using potato bread. I've had it before, and it's very, very delicious. But you can use whatever you have on hand. And we're making a total of 5 sandwiches, so we need 10 slices of bread. You might not be able to fit all 10 slices of bread onto the thing all at once, but that's just fine. Put as many slices of bread on here as we can. Looks like we're only going to be able to fit 8. You know what? We're actually going to be able to fit all 10 slices on here. So that's 6, 7, 8. And we can squeeze these guys in here. Just right in here. Right in here. This is going to go directly into the oven to toast. It's going to toast for about 5 minutes on one side. And then we'll flip it over and we'll do about 5 minutes on the other side. We got our tomato soup over in the works over here. Our tomato soup is looking pretty fine and dandy to me. It's not quite as thick as I'd like it, but it's working on reducing. And so that'll thicken up more as it reduces. And our bechamel is melting nicely. It's melting very nicely. And so our next step, we've got our ham ready. And we've got our turkey ready for both sandwiches. And also we've got some mustard. We're going to slather the bread with mustard. And so what we're going to do next is we're going to take our Gruyere cheese, because we're going to need this Gruyere cheese, and we're going to grate this Gruyere cheese. This is going to go inside the sandwich and on top of the sandwich, and it's going to go in the oven, and it's going to get nice and golden brown. We'll go ahead and get our box grater that we used earlier for the Gruyere cheese. We're just going to grate this cheese down. We got that toast in the oven, so here in a minute, we're going to need to go ahead and let that toast. One thing that you don't want this time is you don't want to put those big chunks into the sandwiches. You want to get it fine grated as best as you possibly can. Whereas the sauce, if the cheese was to melt, it melts, and so you're not really worried about these big chunks. This is going to melt, but not as much. We just got our Gruyere cheese grated. We got some cheese nuggets over here. Maybe you could batter these and deep fry these like mozzarella sticks. But those aren't going to work for inside of the sandwich. And so maybe that's another episode. We got our cheese sauce over here. It's looking pretty fantastic. Our bechamel. It's a white bechamel. If I would have darkened the roux any further, it would have changed the color of our bechamel. And our bread came out of the oven. And our tomato soup is looking good. So everything is coming together. We're just going to leave the tomato soup on low because our sandwiches are almost ready. So we're going to bring our bread over. And so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make our sandwiches. And we're just going to make them right on this pan. We're going to take our Dijon mustard, slather some on each piece of bread. That's going to add some flavor to it, and it just complements the sandwich very nicely. Spread this around. And then once we've done that, we'll go ahead and we'll layer our ham on here. And we'll layer our turkey on here. We're doing 2 turkey and 3 ham. We have 10 pieces of bread. It makes 5 sandwiches. You can make however many sandwiches you need. The more sandwiches you make, the less bechamel sauce that each of your sandwiches is going to get. That's alright. So we got our Dijon mustard spread all around. And so next we're going to go into making some sandwiches. We're just going to use all of the ham we have and give it to 3 sandwiches. So nice thick meaty cuts of ham. So 3 ham sandwiches. We're going to take our turkey and we're going to put it on these last couple of pieces. Maybe you don't want to put a whole bunch of turkey on there. You could try it easily with another meat, like a chicken. Like a roasted sliced chicken would be awesome. So now that we've stacked this thing, loaded it with meat, next we're going to add our cheese. So we're going to add some grated Gruyere to each sandwich. And then take your other piece of toast and slather it on top. Separate these sandwiches out in a little bit. There's our turkeys. Here's our hams. Hams are on top. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our bechamel sauce. We're going to pour our bechamel sauce over the top of all of our sandwiches on this pan. This is also why the aluminum foil comes in handy. So we're going to start and we're just going to get some bechamel on top of these. We're just going to drown in bechamel. Maybe a little bit too much bechamel. And we're going to scoot this sandwich away from the edge so the bechamel doesn't go pouring off the pan. Definitely a knife and fork sandwich, guys. Don't expect to be picking this up with your hands. Lastly, we have one last thing of Gruyere cheese that we're going to go ahead and grate, and we're going to put on top of this, as well as we're going to sprinkle some Parmesan on top, and then they're going to go back in the oven for about 5 minutes to toast. And then we'll have our sandwiches done, we'll cut them up and we'll serve them. So we finally got our meal plated up. We've got our fantastic spicy tomato soup with our blue cheese cream, and we've got our ham and cheese sandwich, our fancy ham and cheese sandwich with the bechamel sauce called the croque monsieur. We also have turkey ones. And so this is what I said I'd prepare for you, and I do believe I've succeeded. I'd like to thank you all for joining in on this episode, and I hope you continue to watch more. Thank you.